Edgar Feuchtwanger, here on The Chauncey DeVega Show.
When I was 14, I stayed out one night. Oh, mama.
Seeing all that you've seen, you're a historian, and obviously the rise of the Nazis and World War II, all that you've seen, when you look at the world today with Donald Trump in America, these fascists in the United Kingdom, people marching in Poland and Hungary, chanting slurs about the Jews, would you ever imagine you would have seen this?
No, I mean, I don't know whether it's as bad as it was then, but it isn't good. Let's put it that way, isn't it?
Absolutely not. Do you think these folks have just always been with us and they're not going anywhere and they just take advantage of certain opportunities to come to the forefront?
It's always there. It's hardly ever absent, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, this undercurrent has been here and these folks are opportunists. Here in America, they had those riots in Charlottesville and you had young men, young white men in the street chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," saying Heil Hitler. And this is 2017, 2018. What was the impetus for writing the book? Was it just the story that you just had to tell and get out to the world?
You know, I've written many books. I thought, you know, while I can still do it, while I can still remember it, it'd be worth writing, wouldn't it?
No, absolutely. In terms of your memory, and you even mentioned this in the book, I mean, it's remarkably lucid.
This whole story, you know, of Hitler and how I saw him and how we saw it all, that keeps on being brought up, so I can't ever forget it, you know. There may be other things I can forget, but that I can't forget.
Say in writing it, you remember things that you thought you had forgotten, and sometimes you remember things you had intentionally forgotten. Did you have any moments like that?
Yes, I mean, it seems to me when you've lived a long time, phases when some things are your daily bread and butter, and then somehow they go down over the horizon and you forget about them, and something may happen to bring back the memory, and that's how it is. But this thing, you know, Hitler and all that, that's so penetrating that you never can forget it, or you're never allowed to forget it.
You know, you were 8 years old when Hitler, I mean, it's an unbelievable story, literally moves in across the street, diagonal to you.
We knew, of course, that Hitler was a bad thing for us. We knew that, but we didn't know that he was going to turn the world upside down and kill people by the millions. That we didn't know. One can't anticipate a thing like that, can one?
No. You know, a lot of historians, you know, all the many, many volumes that have been written about the rise of the Nazis. And one of the themes, as you certainly know, is that the Germans at the time, they knew something was bad. But in the beginning, they're just like, oh, he's a troublemaker, maybe a bit of a joke. These Nazis, they're thugs, but nothing will come of it. We're a good people. In Germany being one of the most hospitable countries for Jews, one of the most intellectually advanced countries, rich countries. And it happened.
This was the sort of mistake people like my father made, you see. I mean, he couldn't really believe that it would go like this. Yeah, he couldn't believe that. And so he didn't do the right thing, you know. He should have got out much sooner, shouldn't he?
And your father and others, your father was an editor, right? Worked in the newspapers. And of course, Hitler would attack the press, prison, kill people, use the SA, the brown shirts and the like. Was it just that your dad and others, they were in denial, or they just didn't think it was possible because it was so unfathomable? A mix of the two?
Yes, I think they thought it would be a passing phase. It was something that would happen and go away again, something like that. Well, what is also, you know, most remarkable is, you know, that my uncle, the writer Leon Feuchtwanger, he was very much in Hitler's personal bad books because, of course, he had satirized him as Rupert Kutzner in the novel called Success. And this enormously annoyed Hitler. But what they never realized, that we, my father and me personally, the closest relations to my uncle, his immediate relations, were living right under his nose.
And you're a historian, you obviously have the intellectual tools. What was it like for the German people as they saw this happening? Because I'm thinking about America and all the horrible things happening right now. I don't know if you saw it, but today they announced that Trump is going to separate children from their families who are immigrants, illegal immigrants, and put them in military bases and warehouses. And I'm really worried that evil takes place. Hannah Arendt talked about this. Evil takes place a little bit at a time, but when you're in the middle of it, you can't make sense of it sometimes. Was it like that for the Germans?
I think so. Hitler was seen by some, the president, Hindenburg, called him the Bohemian Corporal. He was nothing really. That somebody like that could turn everything upside down seemed almost impossible to imagine.
And then you realize it, and it's too late. Hitler, as I said, literally your neighbor. They described him as being common and banal and just uninteresting. Was he literally like that?
No, one knew he was a dangerous man, that he wasn't good for us, that nothing good to us could come from him. We knew that. It went quite as far as it did. We didn't know. We couldn't realize.
And what did your parents, your mother in particular, and also other family members, what did they say when Hitler moved across the street? Did they tell you to hide? Did they say, we knew something is wrong, avoid him? Were people just curious? What was that like?
They thought it was odd. They didn't think all that much of it, Describe how I was taken for a walk by my nannies in those days, and the housemaids and all these people were good Catholic girls from the Bavarian countryside who came into Munich to get jobs. And I had a nanny called Rosie, and used to take me for a walk every day. Fresh air was good for me. And, we passed Hitler's front door just when he came out. That's the closest I ever saw him, because he didn't know who we were, and he looked at me quite benevolently, and that was it. But, that we were right in the middle of the whole thing. When I went to school, my first school, my elementary school, I had to pass the villa of Hoffmann, his photographer, who was the employer of Eva Braun. Well, I can remember Hoffmann well, coming out of his underground garage in his silver Mercedes, and I had a friend at school who had the villa next to Hoffmann, and through the fence you could sometimes see Hitler lying in a deck chair in the next garden, and all that sort of thing happened, which makes it sound as if it was quite cozy, because it wasn't.
Trying to paint a picture, because as adults we understand things we don't as children, right? Seeing the world, and children see things with remarkable clarity. There's, I'm sure you've read some of these books about children who were in the death camps and right under the Nazis, and some of their books and the things they would reflect on and the games they would play is a way of trying to make sense of this horror they were experiencing. What was his presence like? You said he looked at you benevolently?
Yes, I remember seeing he wore a white Macintosh, and he wore an ordinary hat, a trilby hat, and the people in the street immediately shouted Heil Hitler, but he just lifted his hat a little bit, got into his car, and there was one closed car. Of course, later on it was all quite different. There were always at least 3 cars, which were filled up with his bodyguards, and the SS bodyguards took over the flat at the bottom of his block, and you could no longer walk on the pavement in front of his house. You had to stay on the opposite side of the road, and that sort of thing.
Thinking about the structure of the book, because you're looking back and you annotate things year by year, and you see now it seems the inevitability of the Holocaust. This is a series of decisions made by people to kill their fellow human beings by the many millions. Thinking about, Kristallnacht, or just the way that these laws were passed, preventing Jews from working in certain professions, taking property, not able to go out in public. What were some of the steps along the way? It seemed like one way one day, and then maybe the next day things were totally different. Was it that sudden or was it gradual?
I mean, the thing, of course, the night of the long knives, when Röhm and his SA lot were murdered, 1934. I remember seeing Röhm. You see, Röhm lived just a little bit further away. Hitler lived on the Prinzelgartenplatz, and on the other side of the Prinzelgarten there was a villa in which Röhm lived. I remember seeing Röhm in one of Hitler's plebiscites, you know, the one about leaving the League of Nations. I think it was in November 1933, and I went again for a walk with my nanny, and we passed the polling booth near where polling was going on, and we saw a press photographer outside, and of course press photographers in those days were very obvious. They had huge, heavy cameras, and we thought there must be something going on, so we stopped, and out came Röhm on the arm of his mother, and she had a hat on like an upturned flower pot, saluted the press photographer with a Nazi salute, and of course, only 6 months later, he and his lot were all murdered.
The Night of the Long Knives happens, and we mentioned children earlier because the Nazis, they literally transformed